Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about positionless basketball, but mainly what positions are. First, we need to establish what to look for from each position. We need to know what the center does, or the 5 if you will. That's another thing too. At some point, we switched from having names for positions to numbers, those numbers being 1 through 5. I assume it's because a 5 is way easier to write on a whiteboard than center. So if you don't know what the translation is from English to the number, 1 means point guard, 2 means shooting guard, 3 means small forward, 4 means power forward, and 5 means center. The only name for a position that actually still stands from its origination is the center. All the other names have changed. They called the center because he was always in the center of the court, because they would do a jump ball after every single basket. Isn't that crazy? So the center never really strayed that far from the middle of the court. Now, did you ever wonder why they call guards guards? Like there's something inherently defensive about the position? Well, it's because it was originally a defensive position. The guys that would play in the backcourt were defensive players. The formations actually looked a lot like soccer or football if you're not from here. You had a standing guard. This guy was in a defensively focused position, the kind of the last line of defense between the offensive player and the basket. In soccer terms, it would be like a center back or a sweeper. Think like Rio Ferdinand or John Terry. If you ever played organized soccer, you know this is an appropriately named position, because that player just kind of stands around until someone's on a breakaway. I played center back. It's so boring. So the standing guard morphed into the shooting guard. Then the attacking guard was the player that started the offense. That's obviously the point guard, who, if you think about it, is kind of like a midfielder, a guy who initiates the offense. Think about a Zinedine Zidane type. I apologize, my soccer references are very dated. Then you had the left forward, who would be the small forward now, sort of like a wing. Think like Gareth Bale. I promise I'm going to use one example that isn't a retired soccer player. Then lastly, you have the right forward, who is the main scorer, which is now what we would call the power forward. Now the 4 is not the main scorer. Things have changed, but in soccer terms it obviously still is. Think Lionel Messi, think Cristiano Ronaldo. I think those guys are kind of still playing, right? So basketball used to look a lot like soccer. Players used to actually defend in the backcourt, which feels really stupid now. There's no point in wasting your energy on guarding a guy that has no potential of shooting a good shot. The rim is tiny when you compare it to a soccer goal, so you might as well have your entire team just defend the front court and leave the back court entirely open. Who cares? No one's gonna shoot a half-court shot in the middle of the game. It's probably not going in. If you think about it, the size of the rim is the defense for the backcourt. The most important defenders play closest to the hoop, hence why typically the defensive player of the year is always a center. 26 of the 42 DPOYs that have ever been given out have gone to centers, and only 2 of them have been guards. That's Marcus Smart and Gary Payton. You guys knew that though, right? The centers play close to the hoop. They prevent all those easy buckets. If you want to score on some of the best centers in the league, you gotta develop your mid-range. Now let's talk about the center position a little bit. I think the center position is the most unique position in basketball, because if we're basing the value of a center on the traditional skill set, a lot of that skill set is just being large and obstructive. The closer an NBA player resembles a tree, the better. The most classic example of a center is Bill Russell. Bill Russell was a good offensive player. He averaged 15 points per game for his career. That's pretty solid. Russell mainly provided value on the boards and on the defensive end of the floor. He was the ultimate rim protector. It's unfortunate though, because Bill Russell played in an era where blocks weren't being tracked. It'd be interesting to know what type of numbers he was putting up, because his rebounding stats look fake. Look at these numbers, man. He averaged 22 rebounds a game for his career and 25 rebounds per game in the playoffs. For reference, there were only 17 games last year where one player got 22 rebounds, where Russell was doing it every night. Also, take a guess at what the average rebounds per game were for Domantas Sabonis last year, the guy that led the league in rebounds. I'll give you a second. It was 13.7. There were years where Bill Russell was almost doubling that. I guess centers were just better back then, huh? They don't make them like they used to. Well, no, it's because the game changed. People got good at shooting. They got good at shooting, and they also got good at shooting from further away. The modern version of a center has a larger skill set than any of the players in the 60s or 70s. And I'm not even talking just center. I'm talking everybody. And that's the way that that position has changed, in that it really doesn't have that much meaning anymore, other than the fact that centers still protect the rim. They stay close to the rim, but they still have to come out and guard guys in the mid-range, just like a wing would. Then on the offensive end, most centers have to come out and play beyond the arc. Just about every center in the NBA runs a pick and roll. It's the most common play in the NBA. They've got to set a screen, they got to be ready to receive the ball in the paint, then take it to the rack. Some centers like Brook Lopez even do the pick and pop, which is just like the pick and roll, but the center has to shoot it. Or in some instances, with a player like Kevin Love, he'd be playing the center on defense, then putting up threes in the pick and pop. There used to be centers in the NBA that had a really low level of skill, but their stature gave them value. Now those players have been phased out. We have giant players in the league with the skill sets of guards. NBA centers can do it all now. Center Brook Lopez saw this coming. The first 8 seasons of his career, he only shot 31 threes total. The last 8 seasons of his career, he shot 2,651. From the 2016 season to the 2017 season, he went from shooting 14 threes to 387. This is my favorite example of a player who saw how the game was moving and changed his play style to keep his job. Things that players like Roy Hibbert and Timothy Mozgov didn't do. So positions in basketball aren't necessarily dead. Not every player is skilled at everything. But we're starting to see players who have such an expansive bag that it's really hard to call them either a guard or a forward. Those two positions have become ambiguous. The point guard is the most easy to recognize. He's the guy that brings the ball up the court. That's the defining responsibility of the point guard. Then he's usually the fastest player with the ball, he's the best passer. You want your point guard to possess the ball the most, because he's the best at getting the ball to open players. Think players like Chris Paul, Fred VanVleet, Tyrese Halliburton. Steph Curry and Damian Lillard also are point guards, but less so in the classic sense, since they do most of their team's scoring. Now, a shooting guard is typically the team's best shooter, especially from three-point range. This is a more ball-dominant player, someone that can get their own shot. Less of a creator usually. Think someone like Klay Thompson, Donovan Mitchell, Bradley Beal. Then the forwards have more size than guards. They're more burdened with the duty of rebounding. The small forward, though, a little less so. They get rebounds, but their primary focus is to be a versatile scorer. They've got to be able to shoot in the mid-range, but a lot of their scoring depends on their size, their strength, and their speed. I'm talking footwork, cutting through the lane, driving to the basket, and these guys typically get the most money because of having both size and skill. Think players like LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, even though he's like an XXL small forward. Then the power forward is really closer to a center. They are doing a lot of rebounding and rim protecting, but they have more of an offensive package than a center. Most of the skill in that package being able to shoot or pass near the basket. Giannis is the best example of a classic power forward. Power forwards are the ones that are most likely to get triple doubles. Luka is probably the most versatile offensive player in the NBA. He does all the responsibilities of positions 1 through 4. He brings the ball up the floor like a point guard. He shoots more than any other player on his team like a shooting guard. He gets to the rim and finishes like a small forward. And he's 6'7", so he's getting a lot of rebounds too. But on defense, he really has no identity whatsoever. The Mavs kind of hide him behind the other team's worst offensive player. His responsibilities on defense are mostly get some rest, maybe get a rebound, stay in front of a guy or two. Now, Jokic is also a positionless player. On defense, he's 100% a center though. He does his job as a rim protector. Earlier in his career, that was the one fault of Nikola Jokic. Everyone would say he wasn't a good defender and that he was slow. But people have not said that in years. He doesn't rack up a lot of blocks, but I still think he's one of the top 5 rim protectors in the league. Both him and KD, I always feel like never get enough shine for how good they are at defense. But anyway, on offense, Jokic is the main ball handler, in the sense that every play runs through him. I believe he had the most touches of any player last year besides Jalen Brunson. It's very, very rare that the best passer on a team is the center, but I think that's what makes Jokic's game so fun to watch. He plays in the center of the court, and when he gets the ball, you really have no idea what he's going to do with it. He's not a point guard because he rarely dribbles. He's not a center because when he receives the ball, more than likely, he's not going to finish the play. I think the players like Jokic are the future stars of the NBA. Embiid's passing ability is getting better every year. Then you got players like Sabonis and Sengun who have very similar skill sets to Jokic. It seems to be that players aren't being trained positionally anymore. The best players are now just kind of jacks of all trades because the league has become so dynamic that if a player stagnates his game, other teams will expose him immediately. Alright, thanks for being here. Thank you so much for liking the video. It's really helped a lot. YouTube likes long videos and they like videos with a lot of likes. So leave a comment. This was a suggestion. I reply to every single comment or suggestion. So I really appreciate those. I think that's it. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.